Today, I want to talk about motivation versus discipline, and also how accountability kind of flows underneath both of them. And this is something that I've just been thinking about a lot lately. I've been reading more things that continuously kind of pop up this idea that you need to lean into discipline because motivation's fleeting. And I think that for a long time, when I heard the word discipline, it was very negative, right? So as soon as it would be, oh, you need to have the discipline to go to the gym every day, to journal at this frequency, it's like, oh my gosh, dude, I don't want to be disciplined. That's something that growing up, discipline meant running wind sprints. It might be getting in trouble with my parents as a kid or the teacher. And so there's just a negative connotation associated with it. But as I've reflected back especially over the past kind of 5 years or so, and then even looking back further than that, I start to realize how crucial discipline is and how reframing it as a positive as opposed to a negative and thinking about discipline as self-accountability, kind of at least rewire that in my mind. And so to kind of take a step back, I'm not sure if, others are feeling this way or you're like, well, is it either or? And for me, I really think that, I'll think about a couple specific examples and share some stories, here in a second. But when it comes to motivation, I really need that motivation in order to identify a goal of where I want to be, what I'm trying to accomplish. And if I'm not motivated to get there, then I don't put in place the accountability requirements or that discipline. But as I was kind of reflecting on it, like one of the things that, for me personally, right, so I had this event that happened to me in my early 20s, and what happened from it is it was a traumatic event, and it was really where I went from being kind of the person that I was to just someone entirely different. And then I went underdiagnosed with a form of PTSD for almost 10 years before I finally got diagnosed with it, and then told, well, I can't help you. I need to go find someone else. Finally found a therapist that felt like they could help me through it. And then over a 12-week period doing EMDR therapy, that's what worked for me to get through this form of PTSD and actually bring color back into the world. And when that happened, I was so thankful. I was so grateful to just feel more like that 18, 20-year-old kid again that kind of loved life, as opposed to feeling like I was a shell of myself. And, my emotions or the things that I was trying to feel felt more like external validation of trying to show people what I thought they expected the reaction to be or how they expected me to be, as opposed to that genuineness that would start to shine through and you could kind of see. And I know that, after this, my father told me, I can actually see the light in your eyes again. I didn't realize anything was wrong until going on the other side of it. But then it was clearly apparent that you just weren't yourself, for that extended period of time. And, I'm sure at a later date, we'll dig into more of that particular story. But the reason I wanted to start there is because once I got that support and that help, what started to transpire afterwards was this kind of letting myself go physically, because I was just so thankful and grateful. And it's like that phrase of fat and happy. I was ready to celebrate with food, with friends, just even if it wasn't about like the PTSD, it was just this feeling of kind of experiencing life again in a different way than I had. And so this was also, through COVID. So there was periods of kind of lockdown and what can you do? How easy is it to exercise? Everyone started cooking more at home, maybe drinking a little more, all that stuff. And so what I found was I just through kind of COVID and being a little more sedentary and not being able to get out to the gym and things like that, I gained a little bit of weight. And then after going through this therapy over the next 3 or 4 months, all of a sudden I ballooned up to almost 300 pounds. And so I think it was around Christmas of 2020 Christmas of 2020 was just like, oh man, I need to make this change. And I started to think about, okay, well, what does that kind of look like, for me? Actually, it's 2021, but regardless, it was all of a sudden kind of looking in the mirror and I'm like, man, I feel so good emotionally, but physically that does not reflect, what I look like right now. It actually reminded me of, I don't know if anyone's seen How I Met Your Mother, but over the course of the seasons, there's one where two of the characters, Barney and Robin, get together, and then through their relationship, right, when they're about to break up, they both just gain a ton of weight, quit taking care of themselves, and for different reasons. But it felt like for me, I was so focused internally that I kind of forgot about nourishing my body and what that physical ramification looked like. And so where I'm going with this is the fact that at that moment, I decided, you know what, I don't need a six pack. I'm not trying to look like I did in high school when I ran track, as a varsity athlete, but I do want to be healthier. I want to be able to, pick out a shirt or some pants in my closet and I know they fit right away. But I didn't want to do some crash diet. I didn't want to try to get a GLP-1 or something like that. That's okay if, you need that, if a doctor says that's the path. But for me, I wanted to say, okay, I just worked through this really traumatic, emotional event. I was able to seek treatment that was just, a form of talk therapy. Shouldn't I be able to do something similar when it comes to my physical health? And that's where this idea of discipline and accountability really started to root for me, because I was able to do it within my EMDR therapy and journaling and, following that plan or that direction. But then when I set out on this physical journey, the first step was just trying to make better choices when it came to food. Like, it's okay to celebrate at times with it, but doesn't mean you need to always overindulge, and really think about the 90-10, right? And it can't always be that 10%. Ooh, a little treat. And so over the course of that first year, I lost like 30 pounds. And then continued to implement those changes, continued to lose another 20 pounds the following year, and then started to see this whole transformation. And now when I go into my closet and I pick out some clothes, I'm so confident it's going to fit. I can feel like what I look like on the outside much better reflects how I feel on the inside. And that just started this process for me of, discipline's not bad, right? Discipline might require some friction, and I have to be motivated to get that result. But ultimately, I can't rely on being motivated day in and day out to make the right choice. I need to hold myself accountable and look back and say, okay, am I really motivated for the right reasons? What is that reason? And then how can I use those habits and behaviors over the course of this journey to continue to reinforce this new identity that I'm trying to get to, and ultimately will just become who I am. So that was something that was, really eye-opening to me. And then after, we had our daughter, the other thing that became really apparent when it came to this motivation versus discipline is that I was so highly motivated to set a good example. And so to me, that looked like I didn't want every day after work or every Saturday to be like, let me go crack a beer and drink that in front of her and create this kind of subconscious habit. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to drink at all, but it does mean that I'm like highly conscious of what does that look like when she sees my plate. Does it look like a balanced meal? Am I eating vegetables? Is it something that she can replicate? Even as simple as like posture, right? So I have all these aspirational ideals that I want to bestow upon her, that I want to live out. I'm so motivated for it. But then, what happens when you have a couple bad days at work or life starts getting you down? It's easy to revert back into, whether it's drinking or candy or food or whatnot, right? And so what I constantly have done is to be, and I'm not saying I'm perfect and I, fail a fair amount at setting that example, but I'm very conscious of trying to hold myself accountable and then using the motivation more for, I'm motivated to get to this goal, But the only way to get to that goal is to have consistency within discipline and accountability. So that's really what I've been kind of thinking about a fair amount the last, few days. And then I was actually talking to one of my friends yesterday just about a new venture and kind of the process to get there, and this idea that you can be so stuck in your head or in the strategy that like the action doesn't come. And so many times setting that deadline, right? He was like, hey, I want you to send me these 2 things whenever you get them done. And I was like, great. In my head, that was like, I told him about what I was trying to do, and he volunteered his time to review it. So I'm like, I got to get this out in the next, this week, right? All of a sudden, that compelling event, that accountability, actually created this well of energy and motivation, that before it was just hidden behind being kind of timid of, am I going to hit the mark? Is it going to be polished the way that I want? Is it going to be perfect? Do I need to do more research? And at the end of the day, it was like, you got to get something out so you can iterate on it. And so that was another just great reminder of sometimes you need that external accountability, or you need someone that kind of nudges you, and then you take that and create internal deadlines to kind of move the ball forward. And, I think that there's an example at our house right now that's really fascinating, because I think I could use this as an analogy for so much more. But we have a nice reasonably sized big backyard. It's when we have people over, generally, we always wanted to be outside if it was possible. That Midwest weather doesn't always allow for that, but that was traditionally the goal. And then about a couple years ago, our deck started to just deteriorate. There were some rotten spots and things like that, but it's not cheap to kind of redo. So we patchworked a little bit of it, but just continued to have new boards that would have that same issue. And so this year, we were like, okay, we're finally going to get this thing done, right? And so, found someone that would be able to restore the deck, got the quote, worked with them on logistics, navigated the weather, and we got it all knocked out. And so once that new deck was actually put in, then we were able to kind of bring some of the furniture out that we used to be able to have dinners outside, to be able to host people, to be able to have that sense of community. A couple of our neighbors came over, and they were like, oh, your deck looks so much bigger. Your backyard looks so much bigger. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it was we were basically putting a Band-Aid on it, for a couple years. What we loved about our house started to, the main feature of being able to use that outdoor space continue to start to come down and deteriorate, because we weren't able to use it, right? And every time we put a Band-Aid on it, we'd use that for a little bit, but started to become more of an eyesore. And then having not just the motivation, because we were motivated to fix it the whole time, but to really factor in the opportunity costs of putting dollars towards that as opposed to another home project or a trip or some other material possession. What it allowed us to do is kind of hold ourselves accountable that we want to reclaim that space, and really that energy. And once that deck was redone, it all of a sudden spurred a whole overhaul of kind of our outdoor space, places where the kids play. And now it seems like not necessarily the financial value of the house, which I'm sure is impacted by the deck and will be positive, but this spirituality, this energy within the house is so much more vibrant just in the 2 or 3 weeks kind of post construction of that, because now we feel like we have a much more usable, livable space that reflects who we are, but also why we wanted to buy this house in the first place. And so I think that, if anyone is struggling with should I do this? Should I do that? I think starting to peel back the onion, excuse me, on why do I want this? Where's this motivation coming from? Is it external, where I want to be able to show this off to friends, families, neighbors, or is it internal? I'm trying to reclaim this feeling, this sense of self, this ability to create community within my home, my business, just my relationships, I think that's where you're really kind of latching on to it. And then there's always an opportunity cost, right? You can always spend those dollars elsewhere. You can always save them and do nothing, right? And I would just encourage you to think about what happens if I do, right? If I do create that action, if I do follow through on that, what happens next? And many times following through on something, or like the deck, we'll keep using that example. As soon as that was finished, it actually opened up more work, more questions, more things to do. Now it's time to clean up the screened-in porch. Now it's time to restore some of the furniture. Now it's time to spray for pests. Now it's time to insert XYZ. And so many times we look at that as a negative, right? Like one door leads to another door, and there's more work to be done. But I think looking at it more as it sets us on a path to realize what we truly want, and for us in this situation, we want it to be a great place for us to spend time with family and friends outside of screens and really be embraced more in nature and in those relationships. And so it was well worth it. But there's continuous things that we kick down the road and we say we can't afford it or we don't have the time for it. And, sometimes that is true, right? Like you might want a Ferrari for a car, but you can't afford that today, right? And you need to go get a Camry or whatever that vehicle might look like. But I think when we kind of take it away from those luxury goods and we think about more just at the high level, what we're trying to accomplish and how do we get there, and then how much does it impact us if we do nothing, and then what is the checkpoint to finally move those scales. And so I think that the other aspect to this is using that motivation to set a compelling event or a goal. So when you are motivated, because motivation is fleeting at the end of the day, that's something that if we could bottle it up, I think that we would all do that in a heartbeat, because we know that when we're motivated, my workouts are better, my relationships are better. It's really when we're not motivated, when we just want to be lethargic or we're fatigued. How can you lean into that accountability to then make sure that you don't lose steam on the motivation? And so for me, motivation's what drives my ability to create a process to get to that end goal, to maybe create that compelling event or that checkpoint that's going to allow me to keep moving forward. And then I also have to use that accountability and discipline throughout that journey to be able to earn it and to get there. Because, typically nothing good happens without work, without some sacrifice, some pain, whether it's big or small. And so as we have these dreams or these goals that have so much motivation behind it and feel so positive, there's always the other side of the coin. And that pain, that frustration, those challenges aren't negative, but they are the opportunity cost that we have to go through to actually achieve what we want in the end. And then that's why it's so vitally important for when you think about that goal, why? Because I will say, at least for me, anytime I've accomplished some big accolade, right? Like it could be being the top salesperson for the year in my company. It could be winning a MVP trophy as an athlete growing up. It never made me feel how I thought it would make me feel. It never made everything all better all at once, and now everything's just great. What really it did was it created a memory of the journey that it took to get there, and this pride or sense of accomplishment that I was able to achieve that through putting in this hard work, this dedication, and ultimately, especially if I could share it so it means more than just kind of myself, it's really a catapult to then what's next. And so that's why I say, as you have these goals, start to think about why you have that goal. It could be a financial goal to be able to put a down payment on a house, to get a better apartment, to be able to buy that engagement ring. And it's, why do you want to do that, right? Is it because I have so much immense love for my partner? I want to be able to share a life life with them, and so I want this ring to represent what that life looks like. Is it more space to be able to have better quality family time potentially because you're just outgrowing the space that you're in today, and that looks like maybe wanting to build memories now that you're not going to be able to get back. But as you peel back the layers to the onion and you kind of ask yourself why, you'll eventually get to that core belief that's going to allow you to potentially kind of change your identity or start to move it that way. But also it's so much easier to apply accountability and discipline to something that we truly believe in, and we allow ourselves to be vulnerable about why we want it. So therefore the pain, the sacrifice, the frustration to get there seems well worth it. So I appreciate y'all taking some time to listen again today. As I think about that discipline versus motivation and how they're both tied together. So just to tie a bow on it, for me, use that motivation to identify the goals and then continue to peel it back to say why. And then if you really feel compelled to get there, if that is your truth, if that is that North Star, that's when you want to put in the discipline and the accountability in that process. It's going to allow you to get there because it's not going to happen overnight. And so generally it's going to take a fair amount of time and a lot of work that you're not going to be able to see the fruits of your labor. So you need to have that North Star in mind. But the only way to capitalize on your motivation is when it's not there for those days or weeks at a time, to be able to lean into accountability and discipline because you know that you're working for something that is so important and true to you that you have to accomplish it. There is no other goal. So we will continue to push forward. All right. Well, until next time, thanks for listening, and I'll be back here again soon to share some thoughts.